Well, the world has taken a big step towards fully implementing the Paris Agreement to save the planet from climate change. 31 more countries have formally signed on at the UN General Assembly in New York. Now, the UN Secretary General predicts it will be fully ratified and come into force by the end of the year. But it is going to cost businesses a lot of money, as Charlotte Dubenskij reports.
What once seemed impossible is now inevitable. I'm confident that by the time I leave office, the Paris Agreement will have entered into force.
It's taken 9 months, but now it seems there will be unified global action to tackle climate change. Under the agreement, more than 55 countries, which create 55% of the world's carbon emissions, were needed to ratify the deal for it to be implemented. Now Mr. Ban says 60 nations have signed up, including the powerhouses of the US and China, the world's largest producers of carbon emissions. But it's still not quite enough, as those 60 countries produce only 47.5% of global emissions. Yet Mr. Ban was optimistic.
It will spur governments to fast-track implementation of their national climate plans. And it will send a strong signal to the private sector that the future belongs to those who invest in low-carbon development and the climate-resilient economy.
But it will come at a cost. Moving away from burning fossil fuels to clean energy sources requires a sea change in government policies. It will also change the tide of how many businesses operate and what they invest in.
Adopting the Paris Agreement sent a remarkable signal to the world. And particularly, it was a signal to the private sector. It's going to be some young entrepreneur, some genius who comes up with better battery storage or better solar panels that have greater efficiency and lower cost. The private sector is going to take the message we sent in Paris and invest, and we will find a solution to this challenge. I have no doubt about that.
The hope is that once the Paris Agreement is fully implemented, it will strengthen support and investment in renewables and drive down costs as competition for the market increases. Developed countries will have to dig deep too to help emerging and developing nations to decarbonize their energy mix. In Paris, they agreed to create a $100 billion fund to increase the use of biofuels, wind and solar energy in those nations. The upfront costs are estimated to be in their trillions, but many say that without a change, the long-term cost to business and the environment would be even higher. Charlotte Dubenskij, TRT World.
Well, we sent Francis Collings down to the United Nations headquarters in New York, and he sent us this update.
Essentially, the way things work at the United Nations is that there are meetings behind closed doors. There are meetings in corridors. The official press releases are the result of many months of negotiation. Now, of course, we have the agreement from Paris from last December, but then we get into the issue of compliance. Who is going to police climate change? It's essentially up to the nations themselves so far, and this treaty could be hot air until they sort out that issue. I'll give you one example, a quote from the Australian Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull. He said, "We have our best endeavours to ratify this climate change treaty." If there's any doubt this was needed, and bear in mind governments have been discussing this since 1992, the US government recently said that August was the 16th straight month where record temperatures had been recorded. Now, the body that is going to put this together, the Climate Change Convention, is a very egalitarian gathering. It's not like the G20, the top 20 economies in the world. Here, everybody has a vote. Everybody has a say. Their next meeting in Marrakesh, and that's starting on November the 7th, but there may be a fly in the ointment because on November the 8th there is a US presidential election. And one candidate there, Donald Trump of the Republican Party, has said if he's elected to the White House, he will tear up any climate change accord that may have been signed by his predecessor.